Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Financial Commute. I'm your host, Chris Galeski, joined by Financial Planning Manager Brittany Yudkowsky. Brittany, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Interesting year. Election years are always fun.
Yes,
and
it
typically around election time, the whole thought about Social Security comes up. And we noticed from talking with clients about Social Security often that people bring emotions into this decision, which is completely normal and fine. We just want to be aware of the impact of taking Social Security early or reacting emotionally, because a lot of the headlines point to the fear of Social Security is running out, so act now. And that may or may not be the case.
Exactly. Like, if there is that initial fear, there won't be that money there for me. And I've been paying into Social Security for all of these years. That's my money. It's going to go away.
But is it really their money?
That's really the question too, because how does Social Security get funded? It gets funded by the workforce now, and you pay up to like 79% of the benefit that people are taking now for Social Security. So it's really someone else's money, but it's really looking at it and this shouldn't really be an emotional decision.
But that's the challenge, right? Because anytime we're dealing with taxes or money, emotions get involved, and we have our personal opinions, and we're gonna have a visceral response to it, right? And it's very common to say, like, I paid into this program, I deserve my money out of it. But the fact is that the current workforce is paying for the benefit of the people that are currently retired. So you're not wrong that you did pay into it. It's just it's not your money that you're taking out. And so that's why the labor force, it's so important and crucial to the longevity of Social Security and making sure that you get your kids and grandkids to work for as quickly and as long as possible.
Exactly. That's the message. Get your kids to work. But really, like, the workers pay for 79% of the benefits. So all these headlines about the trust is going to run out in 2033. Well, Congress has options. I mean, even way back in 1983, they waited until 3 months before the trust ran out to extend the full retirement age for when you take Social Security and to increase the payroll taxes. So not that we should wait until the last minute, but that's a little bit kind of how it works. But there are options. So this 2033 date, like, Congress has options to fund the trust and fully fund the benefit before we get to that point.
Yeah, even those headlines are a little misleading, because in 2033-ish, there are some other articles that say maybe close to 2035. Basically, people's benefits are looking to be reduced if there's no changes, meaning if we don't extend the age. And they could come to people like me and say, hey, Chris, full retirement age is no longer, age 72. And I'm going to say, thank you for the 30 years notice. I'll figure it out. They'll go to you and say the same thing. You'll say, thank you for the 40 years notice, and, be just fine. So they've done this before where they've extended the age at which you can access Social Security. You could also increase the percentage that you pay into it through payroll taxes.
Exactly.
A couple of ways. You could either increase the percentage or the amount, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's what they did in 1983. They increased the percentage. But right now, there's essentially a cap. You only pay Social Security taxes up to a certain amount.
Yeah.
For this year, it's a little under $169,000. So anyone earning over that doesn't really pay Social Security taxes. So they could potentially raise that ceiling and get more revenue that way to increase the trust.
Before we go into, what are the ages that people can start taking Social Security and the pros and cons around that? In another article that I read, it talked about the projections of the labor force shrinking, right? So, our population, we're not having as many kids as we used to, and so the labor force is looking to shrink. And even with those projections, they're assuming that the labor force of workers to retirees reduces from a 3-to-1 ratio down to a 2-to-1 ratio. That'd be a significant decline in workers. Yeah. But if they were to increase that payroll tax into Social Security by 3.5%, split by the employee and the employer, their calculations assume that Social Security would have enough funding all the way into 2098. That's 75 years from now, 74 years from now. That's a long time just by raising taxes by a few percent.
Exactly. So again, that concern, and it hits us emotionally too. well, okay, we don't have as much workforce. Even if I make my kids and my grandkids work, we don't have as many people, but raising the taxes by even just, I know that's that little amount, even though it feels like a lot, like that will really take care of the situation. So again, a lot of this fear around it won't be there. It's my money. I have to take it now. It's like there are options.
Yeah. And, I love the work that we do from a financial planning standpoint because emotions are involved with money, and it's often how we react or we respond to certain things that cause the outcome. You've said a couple of times when you're running scenarios, tell me how long you're going to live, and I'll tell you exactly when you should start taking Social Security. That's impossible to figure out. So what are the ages that people should, be thinking about, okay, if I'm this age, I should be thinking about Social Security. What are those different ages?
So you can take Social Security at age 62. So that's the earliest you can take it. Full retirement age for most people is 67 at this point, and then you can delay it to age 70. So when thinking through when you should take it, there are kind of a few factors. Once we kind of take the emotions out of it, or we deal with emotions. I don't want to take emotions out of it. We're humans. We bring emotions to everything that we do, and they're important. But what factors should we really be thinking about? So growth rates in terms of what your portfolio is getting, inflation, what's happening in the environment, economic environments, and then again, how long you're going to live. Financial planning would be so much easier if we knew that here, but thinking along those lines, having those factors in mind, knowing the age that you can take it, growth rates, if we have a really high growth rate environment, it might make sense to actually take Social Security earlier, potentially, if you can get a higher return. Now, if you need that money to live, not really as much of a factor.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out because, obviously, if you need the money to live, you're making a different choice. But if you're still working and you're under the age of call it 67, full retirement age, it probably doesn't make sense, depending on your health, to start taking Social Security. Because every year you delay between age 62 and 67, it's around a 6% growth rate. And then by delaying between age 67 and age 70, it's an 8% growth rate. So what's interesting about that is if we're in higher inflation times like we are today, you're not only getting that 6 or 8% jump, but you're getting the cost of living inflation bump as well. And so if your portfolio is only growing at, 10, 11, 12%, Social Security in this environment could actually be outpacing that performance-wise, and you'd be better off by delaying.
Exactly. Yeah. That is, again, that hitting on that growth factor and that inflation factor too, that you really need to think about whether it makes sense to take it early, take it full retirement age, or delay it. And kind of that third factor too, longevity. Again, knowing how long you're going to live. Now, we never know exactly how long we're going to live, but part of what we start to think about too, there are things called a break-even age, depending on when you take it. And that's really the age when it's worth it to have either taken it earlier or whenever you take it. So if you take it early at 62, the break-even age is really around late 70s.
So between age 62, by choice is age 62 and call it full retirement age at, age 67. The break-even is what?
Late 70s.
Okay, late 70s.
There. So then once you take it at your full retirement age, break-even could potentially be in the early 80s. Yeah. You take it at age 70, it could be up to the mid-80s. So really, in that sense, too, and it would be so nice if you knew how long you were going to live. But thinking about those factors is if you don't have a great health history, it might make sense to take it earlier, even though you're getting less, right? Because if you take it early, you're getting a check for longer, but it's less. Yeah. So really kind of taking those factors into account, and we have to take all three of those factors because then we don't know for certain when it comes to longevity, even though we can make decisions in the current economic environment about growth rates and inflation.
Look, we've seen people take Social Security for a whole assortment of different reasons, right? They want to, they need to, their friend did it, they think it's going to run out. Yeah. All of those are legitimate factors. I just think that it's a lot better to engage in a conversation with us. We can run some analysis and projections, and then you're making the decisions that's best for you and not necessarily just what your friend or somebody else did. Because I ran a scenario for a client the other day that actually didn't need the money to live off of and was going to take the money and reinvest it. Mm-hmm. And it made sense for them to start taking it at age 67 versus wait till age 70 because the compounding growth of investing that money, the break even was close to age 86, 87. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why there's a range when it comes to the break-even age, because it really does depend on your circumstances, whether you need it, whether you don't need it, can you invest it, what can you do? And it gets even more complicated if you're part of a couple, because then you have two income streams to figure, okay, should one delay and should one take it early? And that's why it's really helpful to like run those projections in the scenarios coupled with the context of your specific financial plan, because as you know, like one size fits all financial planning is not what we do here and not what we believe in. So yeah, there are a lot of factors. So having that conversation with your advisor and your planner about this, really, really important.
Brittany, I'm glad that you brought that up in terms of, planning with a spouse or a partner as well. Those rules have changed in recent years and been more simplified, but doesn't mean it's an easier decision.
Yeah, exactly.
So, if people are reading the headlines, and as we get closer to the election year and entitlements comes up and Social Security running out, just remember that, fear sells newspapers and headlines really, really well, but engage in a conversation with us. Let's talk about your personalized situation and figure out what's best for you.
Exactly. That's what we're here for.
All right. Thanks, Brittany.
Thank you.